The scorching July sun punished the asphalt in Houston, Texas, where the thermometer marked a relentless 103 degrees Fahrenheit. Stephen Adams, 31 years old, wiped the sweat from his forehead as he walked across the sports complex parking lot. His 6'11" body cast an elongated shadow on the ground, while the hot, humid air seemed to stick to his tanned skin. As a center for the Houston Rockets, Stephen wasn't an NBA superstar, but had earned the respect of fans for his impeccable work ethic and community presence since his transfer to Houston in 2024. "Hey, Adams, good practice today," shouted Coach Reynolds. "That defense in the paint is getting more and more solid. Keep it up, and we'll give Golden State trouble next week." Stephen nodded in appreciation, a subtle smile forming on his bearded face. Despite more than a decade in the NBA, having gone through Oklahoma City, New Orleans, and Memphis before arriving at the Rockets, the New Zealander still hadn't gotten used to the American spotlight. With his reserved personality, he remained the same hard-working player who left Rotorua, New Zealand, to build a respectable career in the league. "Thanks, Coach. I'm feeling good," Stephen replied, his accent still noticeable. "See you tomorrow." He got into his black Ford F-150 pickup truck and turned the air conditioning to maximum. The digital dashboard indicated 5:47 p.m. He had arranged to meet his sister Maya, who was visiting the United States for the first time in 2 years, for dinner at 7 o'clock at Buffalo Bayou Park. The radio played country music as Stephen drove through the streets of his neighborhood in Heights. The red brick houses with spacious gardens reflected the prosperous suburb where he had invested part of his contract. It wasn't a flashy mansion, but a comfortable 4-bedroom house, simple, functional, and welcoming, like himself. He parked in the driveway and checked his phone. 2 messages from Maya confirming dinner and a notification from the manager of his charitable foundation that helped underprivileged youth gain access to basketball. Stephen smiled, thinking about next month's event, a tournament to raise funds for renovating courts in public schools. That community work gave him more satisfaction than any victory on the courts. After a revitalizing shower, Stephen opted for a navy blue polo shirt, khaki pants, and brown leather boots. He put on a little cologne, checked the time, 6:30 p.m., and picked up his keys. As he walked out the door, he felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. It was Maya. "Steve, sorry, but I'll be about 20 minutes late. Stuck in traffic on I-10. Looks like there was an accident." "Wait for me?" "No problem," he replied. "I'll walk around the park in the meantime." The sky was beginning to take on orange hues when Stephen parked near the park's restaurant area. Tourists and locals filled the restaurants and trails. Stephen pulled a discreet cap lower, not out of arrogance, but shyness. "That's the guy from the Rockets, isn't it?" he heard someone whisper. Stephen smiled gently and continued walking. He observed the families, couples, and groups of friends enjoying the summer evening. Children ran chasing fireflies, while elderly couples walked hand in hand. It was then that he heard raised voices that stood out from the general buzz. "You promised it would be different this time." A female voice, trembling with contained emotion. "Lower your voice. Everyone's looking," replied a male voice with a harsh tone. As he approached, Stephen saw a couple, a man of about 40 gesturing intensely, and a woman holding the hand of a boy of approximately 10 years. The boy was looking at the ground, visibly uncomfortable, kicking pebbles with the tip of his sneaker. His face contained an expression that Stephen immediately recognized, the same look he had when his parents argued publicly. The sun was already setting over the park, casting orange shadows on the bayou waters. Stephen slowed his pace, feeling uncomfortable witnessing such an intimate moment. Still, something in the boy's frightened look prevented him from simply going on his way. "Mark, please, not in front of Tyler," whispered the woman, trying to maintain her composure while firmly holding the boy's hand. Her red eyes suggested that she had already been crying. "Don't start, Carol," the man replied, running his hand through his graying hair. His tie was loose and sleeves rolled up. "This isn't what we agreed on. You said it would just be lunch, and now you show up with this story about taking him for the entire weekend? I have an important meeting on Saturday." Stephen noticed that the man was wearing a shirt with an oil company logo. The boy, Tyler, alternated his gaze between his parents and the ground, as if trying to become invisible. His fingers tightened on the strap of his small Rockets backpack. "You've canceled the last 3 weekends," Carol replied, her voice mixing frustration and plea. "Tyler was waiting for you with his backpack ready for hours last Saturday, sitting on the porch, checking his phone every 5 minutes." The man lowered his tone, but his posture became tenser. "I've been working 70 hours a week to pay for that private school you insisted on so much. West Side Academy isn't cheap, Carol." "Dad, it's okay," Tyler intervened, his voice small. "Can we just go eat? I'm hungry." Mark looked at his son with an expression that mixed guilt and irritation. "Tyler, the adults are talking. Wait a bit, son." Stephen remained nearby, pretending to check his phone. The park was busy, but no one seemed to notice the family drama unfolding. A group of teenagers passed by laughing loudly, contrasting with the tension between the couple. 3 months, Mark. It's been 3 months of broken promises," Carol continued, her voice firmer. "Don't you see what it does to him? He needs his father present, not just money for school." Tyler released his mother's hand and moved away, leaning against a tree. His teary eyes reflected the lights of the restaurants as he hugged his backpack against his chest. "Don't use our son as a weapon," Mark shot back, pointing his finger. "You know this transfer to Houston was temporary. In 6 months, I'll be back in Dallas and can follow the normal visitation routine." 6 months is an eternity in the life of a 10-year-old child. He needs his father now, not when it's convenient for your career. Stephen noticed that Tyler was discreetly wiping his eyes with the sleeve of his Houston Rockets jersey, with the number 4 and Adams's name printed on the back. The player's heart tightened, instantly remembering his own childhood. Mark ran his hand over his face, frustrated. "What do you want me to do? Abandon everything? I'm doing this for him, too." "He needs you now, not later," Carol retorted, crossing her arms. Stephen's phone vibrated. It was Maya informing him that she was nearby, but he couldn't leave. The anguish on the boy's face deeply affected him. The discussion continued, with Mark talking about financial responsibilities, while Carol insisted on the importance of paternal presence. Tyler moved a few steps further away, sitting on a nearby bench and discreetly covering his ears while looking at the sky, as if trying to count stars. It was at that moment that Stephen made a decision. It might be inappropriate, but he couldn't ignore the suffering of that boy wearing his jersey. He took a deep breath and walked toward the family, feeling his heart accelerate. In his head, Stephen had already given up on this idea 1,000 times, but his feet kept moving forward. A warm breeze blew from the bayou, bringing the aroma of Texan food from nearby restaurants. Tyler was the first to notice him. The boy's eyes widened in recognition, an expression of surprise replacing the discomfort on his face. Stephen offered a gentle smile before softly clearing his throat. "Excuse me," said Stephen, his voice calm but firm, his New Zealand accent subtly perceptible. Mark and Carol abruptly interrupted their discussion, turning to the tall man who had appeared beside them. The initial irritation on Mark's face quickly gave way to recognition. "You're Stephen Adams? From the Rockets?" asked Mark, his posture visibly changing. Stephen nodded, extending his hand. "Yes, that's me. Sorry for the intrusion." "Normally, I wouldn't interfere," he continued, "but I noticed your son's jersey. I thought I might say a quick hello, since it seems like he's a fan." Tyler stepped forward, his voice coming out almost in a whisper. "You're my favorite player. I've watched every game this season." Stephen smiled, bending down to get closer to the boy's height. "Really? That's an honor. What's your name?" "Tyler Collins," the boy replied, a shy smile beginning to form on his face. Mark and Carol exchanged glances, their argument momentarily forgotten. Stephen could feel the tension in the air beginning to dissipate. "Mr. Adams, sorry if we were—" Carol began, visibly embarrassed. "Please, call me Stephen," he replied. "And don't worry. Actually, I went through difficult family moments when I was younger, too." The personal revelation created a brief silence. Mark looked at the ground, adjusting his posture, while Carol observed Stephen with renewed interest. "Tyler," Stephen continued, "I'm waiting for my sister for dinner. She's always late. While I wait, would you like to talk a bit about basketball? Maybe your parents need a few minutes alone." Tyler's eyes shone. "Really? That would be amazing. Can I show you my shot?" Stephen looked at the parents, seeking approval. After a moment of hesitation, both nodded. "We'll stay right here, in sight," Stephen assured. "Just going to sit on that bench over there." As they walked, Stephen felt the parents' eyes following them. The boy seemed to have grown 10 centimeters just being next to his idol. "Do you play basketball too?" asked Stephen, sitting down. Tyler nodded vigorously. "Yes, I'm a point guard at school. I'm not very tall yet, but I have a good shot." "Shooting is all about practice," Stephen replied. "I practiced a lot when I was your age, even though I'm from a country where rugby is more popular." While they talked about game techniques and memorable NBA moments, Stephen cast discreet glances in the direction of the parents. Mark and Carol had moved to a more private location and were conversing with less aggressive gestures. Their body language had changed. The open confrontation had given way to more constructive negotiation. "Do you have pets?" asked Stephen, after seeing a family passing by with a dog. "We had a Labrador named Duke, but he stayed with my dad when we moved to Houston," replied Tyler, a shadow passing over his face. "I miss him." "That must be hard," Stephen commented gently. "Changes are never easy." Tyler agreed. "I like Houston. My new school is cool, but I miss how things were before." "Tyler, can I ask you a personal question?" asked Stephen after a few minutes. The boy nodded. "How do you feel when your parents argue like that?" Tyler's smile diminished. "It's horrible. It seems like it's my fault, even though I know it's not. Like I'm the problem." Stephen nodded understandingly. "When I was younger, I also went through difficult times. I felt exactly as you described." "And what did you do?" asked Tyler, his eyes attentive. "For a long time, I did nothing. Just stayed sad," admitted Stephen. "But one day, I gathered the courage and talked to the adults in my life. I told them how I felt." "Did it work?" The hope in Tyler's voice was palpable. "It wasn't magic," Stephen smiled slightly. "They couldn't always resolve everything, but it helped. Sometimes, adults are so focused on their own problems that they don't realize how it affects their children." As he spoke, Stephen noticed that Mark and Carol seemed to have reached some kind of agreement. Their posture was more relaxed, and Carol even smiled briefly in response to something Mark said. "I think your parents are ready to come back," Stephen commented. "Before we go, can I give you some advice? Be honest with them about how you feel, but also be patient. And remember, problems between them are never your fault." Stephen smiled, taking a pen from his pocket. "Can I sign your jersey?" Tyler's eyes lit up. "Really? Of course you can." As Stephen signed the jersey, Mark and Carol approached, their faces showing a calmness that wasn't present before. The lights of Buffalo Bayou Park shone as night fell completely over Houston. The golden reflection of the restaurants danced on the bayou waters. Stephen was standing next to Tyler, who was admiring the autograph on his jersey, when Mark and Carol approached. "Stephen," began Mark, his tone significantly softer, extending his hand. "I don't know how to thank you. Not just for the autograph, but for giving us a moment to talk properly." Stephen shook the offered hand firmly. "No problem. Tyler is an amazing kid." Carol smiled gently, placing her hand on Tyler's shoulder. "It was very kind of you to spend this time with him. It means a lot." "It was my pleasure," Stephen replied sincerely. "We talked about basketball, shooting techniques, and a few other things." Tyler looked at his parents with a more confident expression. "Mom, Dad, Stephen told me that sometimes it's good to tell you how I feel when you fight." A momentary silence hung between them. Carol was the first to kneel to her son's height. "And how do you feel, dear?" she asked, her voice soft. Tyler took a deep breath, looking briefly at Stephen, who nodded encouragingly. "There's a knot in my stomach, and I keep thinking if I did something wrong. Sometimes I think you fight because of me." Mark joined Carol, bending down next to his son. "Tyler, you never did anything wrong. These are adult problems that I haven't handled very well. I never wanted you to feel that way." "It's true," added Carol, holding her son's chin. "None of the problems between me and your father have anything to do with you. You are the best part of our lives, and we both love you very much." Stephen took a step back, feeling that he was witnessing something deeply private. His phone vibrated. Maya had arrived. He signaled that he was leaving, but Mark asked him to wait. "Tyler," continued Mark, putting his hands on his son's shoulders, "your mother and I talked, and I realized that I haven't been the father you deserve. I promise that will change. I'll reorganize my work schedule so we can spend more time together, starting this weekend. And when I can't be there in person, we'll do video calls every night, without fail." "Really?" Tyler's eyes widened, a genuine smile lighting up his face. "Really?" confirmed Mark, looking at Carol, who nodded. "And we're thinking about bringing Duke to Houston on some visits. What do you think?" "Duke can come?" The excitement in Tyler's voice was contagious. He hugged his father tightly. Stephen smiled, feeling a wave of satisfaction. His phone vibrated again, and he knew he needed to go. "Well, it looks like my sister has arrived. It was a pleasure meeting all of you." "Stephen," called Mark, standing up while still keeping an arm around his son. "Thank you. Really. I think we needed someone to help us pause and remember what's truly important." Stephen nodded, understanding. Sometimes all we need is to see things from a new perspective. "Do you think one day I can be a basketball player like you?" asked Tyler. Stephen smiled. "With dedication and hard work, you can be whatever you want, Tyler. Whatever you choose, I'm sure you'll be amazing." Tyler ran to hug Stephen. "Thank you," the boy murmured. "You're even cooler off the court." Those simple words hit Stephen with unexpected force. As he walked to the restaurant where Maya was waiting, He felt a strange mix of emotions. There was something deeply gratifying in knowing that he had made a difference in that family's life. The restaurant was full, with the cheerful noise of conversations and the aroma of smoked barbecue in the air. Maya waved from a table at the back, her face illuminated by candles. "Sorry I'm late," said Stephen, sitting down. "You're the one who was on time," laughed Maya. "The traffic was horrible. You look different." "Did something happen?" Stephen reflected for a moment. "I think so. I just had an interesting conversation with a young fan." As he told the story to his sister, Stephen realized something important. For years, he had measured his worth by rebounds grabbed, blocks made, and games won. But that night, off the court, without cameras or crowds, he might have made the most important play of his career. 3 weeks later, during a home game against the Dallas Mavericks, Stephen spotted a familiar face in the stands. Tyler was there, sitting between Mark and Carol, proudly wearing his autographed jersey. Next to them, Tyler's grandfather completed the family group. What caught Stephen's attention most was seeing Mark with his arm over his son's shoulders as they animatedly discussed the game. During halftime, Stephen autographed a ball and threw it to Tyler in the stands. The smile that lit up the boy's face was more gratifying than any dunk he had ever made. That night, Stephen played one of the best games of his career, decisively contributing to the Rockets' victory with 18 points, 14 rebounds, and 3 blocks. But at the end, when reporters asked about his inspiration for that exceptional performance, he just smiled and briefly looked to where Tyler and his family were still celebrating. "Sometimes, you need to remember why the game is really important," said Stephen. "And it has nothing to do with score or statistics." The reporter seemed confused, but Stephen just smiled. Some victories, the really important ones, would never appear in any ranking table.